Welcome to Italics, television for the Italian-American experience. I'm your host, Anthony Tamburri. On this episode of Italics, we visited at Lehman College, the recent Joseph Tusiani collection, and we attended the celebration of 20 years of ILICA, the Italian Language Intercultural Alliance, at Tribeca 360. An extensive collection of works by acclaimed poet, translator, humanist, and scholar Joseph Tusiani is now available to the public, courtesy of the Leonard Leaf Library at Lehman College. The library acquired Tusiani's archival collection and makes it available for further study and research through a dedicated website. The collection was curated by Marguerite Zappa, who assisted Professor Tusiani over the many years in preserving his legacy. Italics visits Lehman College to speak with her.
Never take the world for granted. For your lesson, trees were planted. When you eat the sweetest fruit, think of years of bitter root.
Welcome to Italics, and thank you for being here with us.
It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you. We are right now in special collections at Lehman College, which is housing the Professor Tusiani collection. An enormous collection, one vast in scope, rich and brilliant in its content. It's the largest collection that Lehman has ever had.
You started this project when?
March 30th, 2022.
Okay, and it's still ongoing?
It's ongoing, yes.
Right.
The website is up.
Yeah.
It's been finalized, but the collection continues to evolve because this is the year of the 100th anniversary of the professor's birth. So they started with events since January, and they're ongoing. So besides the 108 boxes that are already, that you could see in special collections, we have another 2.5 large boxes called an addendum file, which ultimately will be added to the website.
Never take a thing for granted. You are what the dead once wanted. If your hand can light a room, think of caves of dark and doom and gloom.
There's everything here.
Virtually everything, virtually everything. I mean, the collection is divided into 19 series. It ranges from the professor's authored and translated works, to the translations of his works by others, to contributing author, to articles, essays, and books written about him, to music, to dissertations in Italian, English, and French. One of the series is interesting. It's titled Personal Notes and Comments and Texts. This reflects the professor's personal and eclectic collection of books with his notations and thoughts throughout. One of the books is on display in the exhibit. It is a Latin-French poetry dictionary, a 984-page volume, which Professor Tusiani read from cover to cover, bearing his notes on every single page, a true affirmation of his passion for words, their meaning and source.
Granted, a stone will cancel ant and seed. Granted, a wind will vanquish leaf and light. But if through scorn or providential deed I shall be given the supernal right to linger as a breath and as a name beyond the hushing of both speech and sight, what will these children, past their present game, think, harsh adults, of this archaic me and of my words that sounded all the same? Will what I call a battle prove to be the feat of one more Don Quixote facing monsters that rise from neither land nor sea? Play on, my future judges.
He didn't come here, I think, as the typical immigrant came over. He was already a professor.
Right. He was already
teaching. He had his
23 or
PhD.
4, right?
23 and a half.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. But the idea was that they were going to go back.
Right. Well,
My father had come to America 6 months before I was born in search of work. He was a dilettante. He had a philodramatic and he performed, he put up many plays. I met my father when I was 23 and a half. I had just received my PhD from the University of Naples. And I came to this country with my mother. And my mother had been there with me all those years. I wrote a book about my meeting with my father. La parola difficile, the difficult word.
Oh, siamo cresciuti disgiunti noi due. Tu senza figlio, io senza padre. L'ultima, la meno definibile tragedia dell'emigrazione è questa. Abitua col tempo anche il pensiero a rassegnarsi a mancanza d'amore, anticipando così la morte.
He did go back in 1954. That's when he wrote The Return.
Right. In English.
In English, and this was the amazing thing. The 1956 prestigious Greenwood Prize from the Poetry Society of England. The first, quote, American, unquote, to have received this, and ironically, not submitted by him. It was submitted by Frances Wentworth, Francesca Vinci Guerra, who was already here, an established author, took him under her wing and introduced him to literary circles. It was just phenomenal.
So a poetry reading is a very hard thing. You think that the poet comes here, he doesn't have to prepare, and he just reads. No, he can destroy his audience forever. Because if we do not take something home with us from each poet, it means that a poet has been a failure. We have to take something. Poetry, true poetry, that something, that intangible something that makes poetry, wounds us. And we know that that wound will never heal. It transforms us, an image, a metaphor, something.
What is interesting among his masterful translations, such as the complete poems of Michelangelo, Dante's lyric poems, Leopardi's Canti, Tasso's Jerusalem Delivered and Creation of the World, Boccaccio's Nymphs of Fiesole, Lust and Liberty, the poems of Machiavelli. Probably it's Pulci's Morgante that renders itself unique.
Yeah.
For Professor Trusiani was the only literary scholar to have translated this massive epic poem of 28 cantos, 35,000 verses. I believe it took him 6 years to do this. Consider Lord Byron attempted to do this, but gave up after the first canto. In his essay, The Translating of Poetry, he writes in part, to achieve an intuitive agreement of inspiration between poet and recreator, the translator must be a poet who knows profoundly the language from which he translates.
I made Michelangelo's poetry known to the Anglo-Saxon world because he was not known as a poet. They know him as the genius architect, and painter, and sculptor. I remember even President Kennedy said, I didn't know he was a poet.
So this came to be when then Senator Kennedy was campaigning for the White House. And one of his stops was the College of Mount St. Vincent, where Professor Trusiani happened to be teaching at the time. In the interim, the professor's book, The Complete Poems of Michelangelo, had just come out. Kennedy, recognizing the name, said, so you're the Michelangelo man? And the professor said, yes, I am. So Kennedy responded, well, I had no idea that Michelangelo was a poet. If I become president, I shall invite you to the White House. And the rest is history. He did.
To be believed, a child has crossed his heart and hopes to die. Sweet child, ferment of flesh and smile, little sparrow, hopping and hopping for your crumbs of life, boundless are cross and death, and truth is narrow.
Poetry is sound, but also something else expressed through sound. This something else is thought, feeling, color, and rhythm, blended in a most mysterious and even illogical manner. for the achievement of a most limpid and logical unity. Personally, as a musician, I would describe musical notes in the very same way, thereby definitively stating that music instinctively factored in Professor Tusiani's creative process.
Femmine con tanta con che secchiera e addenette che pezzuliavano e alle pugnali a fare celle chiacchiere doi vicchiaretto cu furticchie fusera.
He played the organ. He had a Hammond organ and played the mandolin. His ability to improvise was extraordinary. I mean, this goes back to his childhood. I mean, going to church, and here's where the religious factor. He loved being in church, and he had this phenomenal voice. I'm sorry we don't have a recording of it, but people used to flock to Mass just to hear this child sing.
We should say that as a child, he was also connected to a famous Pugliese, right? Padre Pio.
Padre Pio, he was altar boy.
Exactly.
He was the altar boy to St. Padre Pio.
Right. And he had this great voice.
Well,
He's had
that's
this great voice.
You know.
This, yeah.
There's a cute story about that too,
Is there?
if I may. Oh,
Okay.
yes, there is. I believe he had gone to a wedding, and he had to speak. And after he gave his speech, a young child went over back to, I don't know if it was a boy or a girl, to her parents, let's say, and said, "Was that God?" So I wasn't surprised to hear that.
Yeah.
Very charming.
We have here in front of us, of course, the 3 volumes that he translated of a sort of anthology of Italian American literature.
You have Italian Poets of the Renaissance in 1971. 1974 are the other 2, The Age of Dante and From Marino to Marinetti. We're looking at a cumulative 581 poems of 113 poets. His vision was very global. He also had an epistolary interview between himself and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This happened in 1959. He reached out to Martin Luther King Jr. to respond to a set of questions for the purposes of his writing article about him. In a letter dated August 8, 1959, King responded to Professor Tusiani's letter and to his questions. There were 4. Basically, they concerned the realization of brotherhood on this planet, if things were better now, meaning 1959 or earlier. What I was impressed with when I found the book in the collection, Influenza Cristiana nella Poesia Negro-Americana. This is Christian influences on African American poetry. The book begins with a lengthy introductory essay discussing spiritualism in African American poetry. And then he continues to translate 31 African American poets from 1700 to 1900 into Italian. I was just impressed by, even in poetry, it was eclectic, it was global. He wanted to know the poetry of all ethnicities, all nations. The awards are numerous here and abroad.
Right.
The tributes throughout his lifetime and after he passed, it was an avalanche. They're ongoing because this year is the 100th anniversary of his birth. You see this unveiling of the sculpture of the professor in the town of San Marco in Lames. And in one hand, he holds the autobiographical trilogy, the first volume, La Parola Difficile. And on the backrest of the bench are the final 3 words of this beautiful poem, O bello immenso. And translated in English, the last 3 lines are, O great beauty, you alone prove the existence of God, who in every moment creates and keeps me alive.
So if someone wants to consult that, what do they have to do? Where can they find that? Is it available? Do they come here?
Yes, just call Special Collections. They can check whatever works they're interested in to view them. Some are obviously in the archival boxes that we have here.
That are all around
They're
us?
all around. They number 108.
Okay.
That's not counting the 2.5 boxes
addendum.
for the addendum files.
So let's look at a few things that we
Yes.
have here. So here, of course, we have a series of his books.
Yes.
We can just go through quickly. So
These are in dialect.
In
This is
dialect,
oil
right.
dialect.
Uh-huh.
This is actually charming because we have a series of poems and letters to the professor from students. And this one he writes in Italian, Joseph, with your poetry, you make our fantasies soar.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
And so in San Marco in Lamas, there's also a Centro Studiani in San Marco.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Centro Studi, Joseph
Centro
Tusiani,
Studi,
absolutely. They publish everything. And this is, of course, Italica, the prestigious journal of Italian studies, where you submitted an essay.
Yeah,
You, Paolo Giordano, and Ryan Calabretta
Calabretta
Sager. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And here's the
Here's the-
Michelangelo,
the famous-
first one, and the updated.
I think that is really going to bring back
Yeah,
to light
exactly.
the complete poems of Michelangelo, and also
Mm-hmm.
it's become a wonderful research tool because of the way Gianluca Rizzo put it together with a
right.
later critical edition in Italian.
Right, this is Poesia per un anno,
Yeah.
90 poems by Baroque Press. Michael Tusiani had that published. And the professor selected the 90 poems, which is funny because he said, these may not be the 90 poems I select tomorrow. You know, because at that moment, that's what he picked. But
Right.
it was in preparation for his 90th birthday, which would happen in 2014. And this is the most incredible
This is a Latin-French
984-page Latin-French dictionary.
This is one of my favorites. Il
Oh, the
Ritorno.
Ritorno,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's one of my favorite collections of his.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think very important for who he is. So this is the Tusiani collection, right?
Yes, this is the exhibit which I
Yeah.
say provides a sampling of what one can expect when they journey through this collection. Just knowing who he was, he said about fame. He
Yes.
said, if fame wants me, knows where to find me.
Right.
He wasn't anyone to get
No.
involved in the
Right.
semantics and
Right.
he just wanted to write.
Yeah.
And that was when he was at his happiest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Just,
Thank
so,
you.
Thank you.
Okay.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Ilica celebrated its 20th anniversary with the theme Artificial Harmonies, Seeking New Pathways. The event featured a conference that invited us to examine the positive influence, but also the limits and criticalities of AI. The celebration concluded with a gala dinner, highlighted by a special performance from violinist Matteo Fedeli and pianist Antonio Scaiola, as well as the presentation of 2 special awards.
For the past 20 years, ILIC has organized more than 30 conferences in Italy and in the United States. And this year's theme is Artificial Harmonies, Seeking New Pathways. It's a theme that invites us to examine the positive influence, but also the limits and the criticalities of the AI in the future world.
I have a digital twin. Is a website, francescorulli.com. It handles about 30 conversations a day. It saves me about 15 hours of work. I have a calendar that doesn't take appointments after 2 o'clock, so I can work less. My father, back in 1982, when we were going to pick up a fax machine, he told me, make sure technology works for you and you don't work for technology. So as humans, we have the responsibility to understand the extent of the development and the technology we're dealing with. Not all AI is the same. ChatGPT is a very eloquent shortcut, but everything we do with it enriches Microsoft. So slowly we're going to just become just parts of the Microsoft Corporation. So that's the reality. My brother just came back from San Francisco. There is homeless on the street and there are cars without drivers. There is no human interaction anymore, so it's starting. So decentralizing, creating private language models is going to be fundamental. Everybody will have the responsibility. It's 3 years I have a digital twin. But as generative AI is only a year, For the first 6 months, I was training the generative AI. Now the generative AI trains me. So basically, if you interact with francescorulli.com, you ask questions, it's going to get you 5, 6 ideas. One of those might not have come from me.
All digital systems in this world are not secure, are slow, like blockchain. In our life, we are no longer simple person. We are no longer single companies. We are person with our data. We are companies with their data. If we lost some data, we are dead. We are lost.
It's absolutely unbelievably exciting what we're hearing from our research people about the pace of change and development, the enhancements of productivity, and how fast this is all going to happen as a result of artificial intelligence. It's both exciting, a little scary, but if you can imagine that in 1987, when I got out of college, they were still teaching computer programming with punch cards. Nobody had a PC in their classroom or in their dorm room. By 1994, we were just starting to bring PCs and networking to bear, and it's taken 30 years to get where we are today. Imagine all of that change happening in the next 5 to 10 years. That's what artificial intelligence is going to do.
One of my person that I consider my mentor it was James Watson. He said that human or any scientist should not depend or driven by the technology. It should be vice versa. We should use the technology. We should be in control, in command of the technology. And this happened in every discovery that was done in the years, okay, to date. So artificial intelligence is important. It's clearly that can help in making connection or linking mechanism. I talk about my discipline that can be distant, in which human mind cannot have access or cannot think about. But at the end, there is always we humans that we need to validate.
I love the idea of artificial intelligence from what I've seen so far, in which I've engaged as well. I don't believe that some ugly creature by the name of Hal is going to raise his ugly head as he did in 1968 in 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think that artificial intelligence is as good as those who input the data. If the data are good and if the data are honest, I think we have some really great things happen. I think a lot of my colleagues are jittery about ChatGPT, for example, because students can generate essays, for example, right, and papers. But I see it as a tool for bettering one's writing, for example. They can do their writing, their essay, 1, 2, 3 pages. They can keep that, then they can put it into ChatGPT, and then we can have a wonderful conversation of what is better, the one that you generated or what the ChatGPT generated. And we can really delve into language, because let's be honest, we live through language today.
In a day like this, November the 2nd, we remember those who preceded us in the other side. We are making also a remembrance for September 11, 2001. We are now honoring the memory of the FDNY. Peter Ganci was the chief. And the chief was running to the first building when he told to his second, Danny Nigro, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "I'm following." "They're attacking the other side too." So he moved there and the building fell on Peter. The first one to receive the award will be the Columbia FDNY.
On behalf of the FDNY Columbia Association, I appreciate this award, and I appreciate the invite and all the generosity from Ilika. We're very proud to be here, and we're very proud of our Italian heritage.
And now the next, representing Columbia NYPD, the brothers of police, Anthony Burgio, the president.
Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the NYPD Columbia Association, I want to extend a word of thanks to Vincenzo Mara, to John Piero, and his board of ILICA for this award and for having us here tonight.
Thanks for watching this episode of Italics. Wishing you all a felice e prospero 2025. I'm Anthony Tamburri. Arrivederci alla prossima puntata.